Hello and welcome to the Rotoworld Baseball Show. Yes, we were circling the bases for a couple of years, but today we're back to the Rotoworld Baseball Show, and honestly, I'm thrilled about it. Circling the bases always will be close to my heart, but Rotoworld just makes sense. There's Rotoworld Football Show, there's Rotoworld Basketball Show, now there's Rotoworld Baseball Show. My name is DJ Short, and with me here once again is Eric Samolsky. This is our MLB Winter Meetings recap episode of the show. Now, going into this week, I was very excited. I was like, man, we're not going to have enough space for all of the moves that happen. Unfortunately, it was not as active as we would have liked. Now, I think this was a very unique winter meetings, Eric,
Sure.
where Shohei Ohtani, as we know, wanted to play everything kind of close to the vest. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is going through the posting process, doesn't necessarily have to rush through it. So I think this is kind of a unique off season where last year a lot of the moves happened during winter meetings. This year, not so much. We still had quite a few moves, which we'll talk about, but a
Mhm.
little quieter this week than I think a lot of people expected.
Yeah, people are waiting. You're waiting for the dominoes to fall. So, and I don't begrudge the guys who are making life changing decisions from taking time to make their
Yeah.
life changing decisions. It is delaying some of these moves, understandably, because like we had reports today after Eduardo Rodriguez signed, which we'll get to later, that like, oh, the Red Sox were interested in him, but they didn't want to make a move until they see what happens with Yamamoto and with Jordan Montgomery so like a lot of these teams just are in a holding pattern.
Right.
Though I will say, like, I do think the narrative about like blaming Shohei for this, or like, there are some people that have been like calling him a diva because he's like keeping this close to the vest. I think it's like super off base, and a little ridiculous to me. Like, also, I we've been following baseball for a long time. Like, I remember when there were no rumors or leaks. Like, we just found out guys signed with teams because they
Yeah.
signed with teams. Like,
Yeah.
it has not always been this way, where we've had so much information at our fingertips whenever we want, and we're getting all these rumors all the time. And
Yeah.
so if he wants to keep things private and visit the teams and do his thing, and not have everybody talking about him all the time, like, why shouldn't that be that? Why shouldn't that be how people do things without it all being all over the
Right.
place? And then you factor in the cultural aspect too, where like, you know in Japan, like, bringing all that attention to yourself and making something all about you is not necessarily something that is done, or accepted in the way that we do it. So I just think, like, let the man have his free agency, let him meet with his teams, let him ask them to keep it private. He never, like, all these people that are saying he's going to punish teams if they make things public, like,
Yeah.
he didn't like say he's going to go John Wick on somebody if they
Yeah.
if they say that he visited them. Like,
Way to go, Dave Roberts.
yeah, it's like, you know what I mean? And you know what? If he doesn't sign with the Dodgers, people are going to blame Dave Roberts, and it's just
Oh,
stupid.
they will. It'll be hilarious if
Yeah.
that actually happens. But it was interesting to see the contrast between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers and how they handled things because the Blue Jays GM, like, it was almost like he was in a secret location, like when he was talking to reporters. And then when it came out, Ken Rosenthal, I think, reported that Shohei Ohtani was visiting the Blue Jays facility in Dunedin, Florida, like after the fact that was
Yeah.
reported. It wasn't revealed by the Blue Jays, but Dave Roberts was just like, "Yeah, we met with him for a couple hours. It was good."
I I loved the video because he pauses for a while before it. Like, in
Yeah,
his head, he's like, "Should I?" He goes, "Whatever." Yeah, we met with him. It
yeah,
was a good
right,
meet. Yeah.
right. And Ron Washington, he was like, they asked him about it, about the chances of Shohei Ohtani returning to the Angels. He's like, "I don't want to let the cat out of the bag." And then people are like, "Oh, he's staying with the Angels," but I don't know if that's realistic or
Yeah.
what. I'm guessing no, but who knows?
Right. Also, like, we talked about this on one of the shows at the end of the year, but like, when it comes to leaks in particular, like, it was a little tricky for Shohei at the end of this year, because after he got hurt, there was that leak that, the Angels had told him to get an MRI before he
Yeah,
hurt his arm, and he didn't want to get one. And then that information came out, and then so people were like, "Oh, like, why would he have refused an MRI?" So it's also understandable for him to be like, if you as an organization can't keep things private, that
Right.
factors into my decision because I got dragged through the mud for something just a few months ago because somebody couldn't keep information private. So I
Right. Yeah. And I would assume like so after he had the surgery, it was kind of vague in the description of what the surgery actually was, if I remember this correctly. But whoever's going to end up signing Shohei Ohtani, I'm sure they will review all the medicals and they'll have a
sure.
full idea of what the surgery entailed. Was it the brace procedure? Was it Tommy John? I don't even think we really even know the answer to that yet, which is pretty weird, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, again, keeping it close to the vest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody expects him to pitch next year anyway, so it doesn't
No.
really matter. You're signing him as a hitter next year and hopefully as a pitcher for 2025. And like we said, Dodgers, Blue Jays, I think they're at the top of the list here as finalists for his Shohei Ohtani. I guess you can't rule out the Angels just from
Mhm.
a comfort level perspective. There were some reports I believe, over the past 24 hours that Shohei Ohtani might make his decision by Sunday.
Yeah, I
Um,
had heard at the end of by the end of the weekend.
yeah.
Um, I don't. It's weird to me that the Blue Jays are in contention for this.
Yeah.
I never considered it. And there's
Yeah.
no reason why. It's not like they're obviously they're a good franchise. They need him, or they could use him.
Yeah.
I was gonna say if he wants to go to a team that has playoff success, maybe not the Blue Jays. But I mean, it has kind of always felt like it might be the Dodgers from the jump.
Yes.
So it's not a surprise that they're involved in the running here. I guess I would have thought that I would have hoped that another team would have made a realistic run, like whether it was the Giants or somebody to keep it interesting. If he goes to the Blue Jays, great. I think it's a really unique landing spot, and it would be pretty cool to see that division with the up and coming Orioles and the always pretty feisty Rays, and then Soto and the Yankees now, and then Shohei with the Blue Jays, and just the Red Sox left somewhere, somewhere hanging around.
Uh, yeah, well, I mean, I think from Shohei Ohtani's agent's perspective, yes, the Dodgers have been the favorites, but like the agent needs another team to be the threat
Yes,
to play off of. Like maybe Shohei Ohtani is legitimately interested in the Blue Jays, and maybe the Dodgers would be the first choice. But you still need another offer to play off of
right.
to get the number that he wants. So that's kind of what I think is happening. But again, it's been a little private pursuit here, so we'll see what happens. With Yamamoto, though, I think it's going to take a little bit longer for this to play out.
Hmm.
The speculation throughout the course of the week here has been Yamamoto, only 25 years old. Players like this never hit the open market at this age, really. So we're thinking maybe 10 years, 300 million. That's what I've been reading over the past couple of days. And it's crazy because he's never pitched in the majors, but this is the day and age where you can measure spin rates. You
Yeah.
know how these pitches will generally translate. Yes, the ball's a little different. You're gonna pitch more often than you would in Japan, where it's once a week. But generally, you could say these skills will translate to the majors. So I think ultimately it'll probably come down to Mets Yankees. But I think that number isn't crazy.
No, I don't think it's crazy. And like, what's the difference really of you know he's pitched in again in professional baseball, right? It's not like he's pitched in higher competition than he would have in the minors.
Yeah.
You've seen it firsthand. People have gone over, they've scouted, they've spoken to people they've scouted tape, they have all the data that you just talked about. So there's so much information, and we understand the quality of competition there now. We have a rough gauge of what level that competition is. So no, he hasn't faced. I mean, he did face MLB hitters in the World Baseball Classic,
WBC.
but
Yeah.
he has not faced MLB competition consistently. But you have enough information at your fingertips to say, okay, what is the realistic outcome of what he's going to be? And
Yeah.
isn't that all contracts really? I mean, and baseball is one of the only sports where you get sometimes like 5 years of MLB experience before somebody's getting a huge contract because of the
Yeah.
way that they've
Right.
manipulated, these contracts where they, have these guys, calling prospects up after their Super 2 deadline has passed. They can get another year of control and blah, blah, blah. But like
Right.
the vast majority of sports have to decide based on college information or minor league information whether they want to shell out lots of money to players.
Yeah.
So there's nothing new in the global sports argument with this. And so, yeah, is it a risk? Sure. But like, again, this type of player does not come around that often based on, what we know he's capable of doing. A 97 mile an hour fastball is a 97 mile an hour fastball. A slider that moves the way, it moves. That's what it does. I mean, maybe it gets hit a little more, but like, this isn't a hitter making the transition and like, oh, can he catch up to this velocity?
True.
Like, this is a pitcher. You see what his pitches do.
Right. So Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, and David Stearns, the new Mets president of baseball operations, they made a trip to Japan to meet with Yamamoto last week.
And his family, they had dinner together.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. I mean, I think that tells you how much the Mets want him.
Right.
Number one, Steve Cohen has, not more money than about as much money as God. He spends $300 million on a sculpture, like every week probably. So like if he wants to get him, he probably can. The Yankees are set to meet with Yamamoto next week, I believe Monday. So it's going to take a little bit more time to play out, but it should be very interesting to see the Mets and Yankees going up against each other. We'll get to more Yankee stuff here in a minute. Before we do, though, this holiday season, get the fantasy fan in your life the exclusive Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle featuring expert analytics, player insights, and season-long tools. Get all 3 of the draft guides for one low price. Go to NBCSports.com/holiday bundle and use our special code here, Holiday 2023, at checkout to receive 25% off and a $10 Fanatics gift card. We're already in baseball draft guide season. We are currently getting our baseball magazine ready. We're hoping for lots of moves before our deadline, which is right before the new year. So please, we need some more moves. We need Ohtani to sign. We need Yamamoto to sign. We need like 40 moves. Can we get 40 moves in like a week? That would be awesome.
Sure. I think we can.
So let's get to
just before we move on. You saw that Jeff Passan went on the Pat McAfee show today and said that he knows that the Mets really want him bad and that he thinks that Yamamoto wants to get paid and that Steve Cohen will do that. But he said, I wouldn't rule out the Dodgers, Red Sox, and Cubs.
Okay.
I find it interesting that he didn't mention the Yankees there because living in New York, a lot of Yankee fans think that they're like a shoo-in.
Oh, yes.
And they might still be. They might still be. But I just find it interesting that those were the 4 teams that he mentioned. So maybe they're the front runners. Who knows?
Yeah, I think Yankees fans have a big head right now. They think the evil empire is back. And that's because the Yankees acquired Juan Soto this week. And so Yankees fans should feel pretty awesome right now because that is a big deal. And it feels like Juan Soto is like, I wouldn't say like been forgotten, but like this dude's on like a Hall of Fame track. He's only 25 years old. He had a really good year this past season. He started out a little slow, but hit 275, 410 on base percentage, 35 homers, 109 RBIs, 97 runs scored. He's led the league in walks for 3 straight years. And if you're the Yankees, like they just like even a league average bat would be an upgrade over what they had last season. The Yankees were 24th in the league in OPS. Only the A's had a worse team batting average last year. The New York Yankees. So to get Juan Soto, put him in the middle of this lineup, yes, the price tag was big. They gave up a lot of pitching depth here. Michael King, who came on really strong at the end of the season, looked like a rotation candidate. Drew Thorpe, their best pitching prospect. Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, who made some starts for the Yankees this past season. So a lot of pitching depth to give up. But Juan Soto's, he's a generational hitter.
It's depth, right? That's what you're.
Yeah, it's depth.
You've said pitching depth, and that's totally valid. And a team like the Padres, who lost so many pitchers, need that depth. But when this was the initial trade offer, and it was rumored that the Yankees didn't want to give up these guys all together, it was like, come on, it's Juan Soto. Like you're moving these guys for Juan Soto because he immediately changes the potential fortunes of your team for this year immediately.
Yeah, and it's 1 year left, via arbitration,
Sure.
but you have Garrett Cole in his prime. You don't want to waste that. You have Aaron Judge in his prime. Like you're the New York Yankees. You gotta go for it. And
You have
I
90
don't
games of Giancarlo Stanton.
yeah, maybe. And Gleyber Torres was pretty good this past
Yeah.
year. He had a
Yeah.
pretty good year. Maybe Volpe takes a step forward this year. I still think it's a flawed team. Um,
Sure.
Carlos Rodon, like, what are you going to get? The Yankees still have to do some things, and I don't think just signing Yamamoto is going to solve their issues. Like, the Yankees need volume. They need
Mhm.
they need 2 or 3 starting pitchers to be in a good position to contend in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get. I was going to say about Montes, but Montes, I think, is now a free agent.
He is, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, right now, if you look at roster resource, they have Clayton Beeter, who was a pretty solid prospect for them, penciled in as their number 5 starter. The Yankees don't want that.
No. No.
Clark Schmidt also in the rotation. Yankee fans might not want that at the start of the year. He flashed at times.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to make a run, that's not ideal. And listen, the lineup, you cannot knock Judge, Soto. You mentioned Torres, the upside of Volpe. Austin Wells is probably their starting catcher next year. He's a highly regarded prospect. But you have, what are you getting from DJ LeMahieu and Anthony Rizzo?
Mhm.
Right? They're older guys who've battled injuries. What do you got? What do you have with them? What
Yeah.
is Verdugo going to give you?
Yeah.
Right? Verdugo's a pretty solid real life hitter. We talk about
Yep.
fantasy a lot on the show. Pretty solid real life hitter, but what is he really gonna provide? How does his bat play in Yankee Stadium? And then what are you getting from Stanton? How many at bats? How many whatever? There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of potential upside.
Yeah.
I think the narrative that like any lefty hitter who gets sent to Yankee Stadium, the immediate thing is like, oh, well, short porch, so tons of home runs, right? Like people were doing it with Verdugo on Tuesday night,
Yeah.
right? Like mapping out how many home runs he was going to hit, and all of a sudden it's like, well, Soto hit 35, so he's going to hit 40.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible, but Statcast, the MLB account, put out a tweet basically with his overlay suggesting that where his batted balls were last year, he would have gained 1 home run at Yankee Stadium.
I mean,
because
if
he would
you've
have gained a lot
watched,
to right and lost some in other places.
yeah, I mean, if you've watched Juan Soto throughout his career, he uses the whole field. Look at his spray chart. Like he's not.
Exactly.
Maybe he is like, hey, I'm going to pull the ball more this year. Maybe
He could.
Verdugo's the same way. I think Verdugo's maybe more likely to take advantage than Soto. Soto's just going to hit like Juan Soto hits, and he hits the ball so hard that it's probably going to go out. Good portion of the time, no matter where he hits the ball. But I think Verdugo, maybe it makes a little bit more sense for him to try to take advantage of it. Verdugo is like, like you said, he's a pretty good real life player. Fantasy, not so much. Verdugo probably should sit against lefties, but I think the dynamic that you like about a Verdugo is that he doesn't strike out. Like he makes contact. That's something the Yankees have lacked
Needed.
in recent years. So I think he could be a pretty decent player. The comp that I've seen thrown around is like maybe he can be like Melky Cabrera Yankee, throwback version, which I kind of dig. I like that comparison. But thinking about Soto for fantasy in 2024, does this move the needle for you at all? Soto from the Padres to the Yankees, like, is he a first rounder now?
So I'm gonna say no on does it move the needle. And I think maybe a couple spots, right? Because this isn't Nationals Juan Soto. So the lineup context is not that much different than what we were drafting the lineup context to be last year. Now I understand Judge is in that lineup and that he's better than any hitter on San Diego. But when we were drafting Juan Soto last year, you were drafting Juan Soto in a lineup that also had Fernando Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts. And so there was a depth to that lineup that I don't know that the Yankees lineup currently matches. Or if you do, if you want to argue it, then it matches it. But I don't think it exceeds it. Now that lineup wasn't up to par.
Yeah,
but
it's top heavy.
He still had basically 100 runs and 100 RBIs. And I don't know that you really can project him for more than that just because he's with the Yankees.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to steal more just because he's with the Yankees, and that's going to depend.
If he gets 10,
also,
you're happy. If you get
right,
10,
and that's going to depend on where he hits in the lineup. There's some people that are saying maybe he hits second and they move Judge to third. Well, if Soto's hitting second and he's on base and Judge is up, why are you stealing him? Mm-hmm. You're not going to let him run when Judge is hitting. You don't want him to run into outs. You already mentioned a little bit of the spray chart. Well, if you look at his Fangraphs page, Juan Soto has a pull rate above 39% once in his career. So he's not even a 40% pull hitter. Yeah. Juan Soto has a career fly ball rate under 33%. Mm-hmm. He has a career ground ball rate of 49%. He had a 51% ground ball rate last year. In fact, he's been over 51% for 3 of the last 4 years. Now, yes, he could change his swing at Yankee Stadium, and he's a talented enough hitter to play to his park, but he's also a talented enough hitter, and we've seen him in the past be the hitter that says, I'm not changing how I hit because you want me to be more aggressive, because you don't want me to take walks. Like, I'm a potential Hall of Fame hitter because I do the things that I do. So I don't necessarily know that he's going to change his approach just because he's at Yankee Stadium. So if you take his 35 home runs, maybe you're penciling him in for somewhere between 35 and 40. And so maybe he gets a slight bump from what he did before. So like all of that is great. And it is certainly a fringe first round pick, but you're not getting massive stolen base value. And you're probably not getting a 350 hitter again. So I think you're fine with him in the high rounds, but I'm not drastically valuing him different than I did before.
Would you take Juan Soto or Freddie Freeman?
So that's a really good question.
Because Freeman doesn't run either, but he's going to have a better batting average. He probably won't hit as many home runs.
And then that to me, that also becomes a question of like first base and outfield. And outfield does dry up a little bit faster than we have expected in the past. And so I do think that's a really good question. And it would, I'm going to kick that can down the road until let's say I would have said Freeman before this trade. And because I just went on a rant about how I'm not changing Soto's valuation too much. Yeah. Let's say I'll stick with Freeman, but it's super close right now.
Yeah, I'll stick with Freeman, probably. Mostly because I don't think you've ever regretted drafting Freddie Freeman. And
sure.
I feel like it's been years for us to learn this lesson, and maybe it's 2024 where he finally goes where he should, which is probably late first round, most likely. So, no, I think Soto will go a couple of picks earlier, just on I've been saying like on inertia. Because he goes to the Yankees, and there's going to be like hype and all that stuff.
Always.
So he'll go a couple spots higher than maybe he really should. Mm-hmm. But we are nitpicking. He's in a great spot to succeed in his walk year and then make tons and tons of money. All right. So what do you think of Michael King in San Diego? We did get that. I believe it was 8 starts down the stretch where he was just fantastic. 1.88 ERA, 48 strikeouts, 9 walks, in 38 and a third innings as he got that opportunity. I think it was like late August through the end of the regular season. I know the Padres will give him every opportunity to be in that rotation. Like you said, they lost a ton of starters to free agency. Joe Musgrove, Yu Darvish coming back from injury. They're going to need that depth. But King, a guy who could pop in mixed leagues next year.
Yeah, I will be out, and probably just because of what this is going to do to the cost of getting Michael King, whether it's in snake drafts, auction drafts, whatever. I'm not out on him as a pitcher, but I'm out on him at where what I think his cost will be. And there are a couple reasons for that. First of all, he was not the stats that he had at the end of last year are not what you should project for him going forward.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he was absurd as a starter at the end of the year last year. And like if I'm looking right now, when you look at his splits as a starting pitcher, he had a 2.23 ERA, right? 51 strikeouts in 40 innings. He's not going to do that. I think we understand that, or I hope we understand that he's not a low twos ERA pitcher. If you look at like what's under the hood, you know, the sweeper is a really good pitch, gets tons of swings and misses, doesn't give up a lot of barrels. The four seam at the end of the year when he was a starter had a 15% barrel rate allowed. So he's kind of sinker sweeper. The changeup, fine. It's pretty good. He has really good control of it, kind of pinpoint control of it. And so I think that gives him a depth of an arsenal where it gives him a third pitch where if that fastball is getting hit, he can go to the changeup. My bigger concern on King is like all of the pitches themselves grade out really well, and I think he has the arsenal to be a solid pitcher. He's battled multiple injuries. There's a reason that the Yankees didn't want him to start for years, even though he had always kind of wanted to be a starter, and they would sometimes give him a couple starts, but he never threw over 63 innings before this year. He's fractured his elbow. He had a stress reaction in his elbow. Also, these are multiple injuries to his pitching elbow. He was on a pitch count when he was a starter. They didn't really want him to go above 80 pitches for a lot of those starts at the end because they were concerned about his health. He threw 104 innings last year. If he was a prospect and threw 104 innings, you would pencil him in for like 130.
True.
And you would say, we're probably not going to get more than 130. So maybe you say the same thing for King. We're probably not going to get more than 130. And we don't know how he holds up as an MLB starter. So there is upside there, but there's a lot of risk, right, for somebody who is going high in drafts right now. Like, here's a question I'll ask you. 130 innings of Michael King. Are you taking a shot on that? Or are you taking on a shot at 130 innings of Chris Sale?
I'd take Chris Sale just because of the track record.
Right. And right now, Michael King is going way higher than Chris Sale in drafts.
Yeah, I would take Sale. Sure.
And I probably lean Sale too. And that's not because I think that Michael King is bad. I'll take and I don't think Sale is the Sale that we knew, 4 or 5 years ago. But I also don't think Michael King is a 275 pitcher as a starter.
Right. So let's hop to the most significant starting pitcher signing of the week. Eduardo Rodriguez signs with the defending NL champion Diamondbacks. Still weird to say that. Anyway, Erod gets 4 years, $80 million from the Diamondbacks, coming off a really good year, resurgent year for him. 3.30 ERA, had 143 strikeouts, 48 walks, and 152 and 2/3 innings. Missed a little bit of time, had a finger injury, a ruptured pulley in his left index finger. So he ended up opting out of the end of his contract with the Tigers. 3 years and $49 million. End up being a good decision to get this 4-year, $80 million deal with the Diamondbacks. There's a vesting option too, so he could end up making $100 million over 5 years. If he continues to pitch well and be healthy. So you look at this Diamondbacks rotation now, which I really like the top four: Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Erod, Brandon Pfaadt. Number 5, we'll see what happens there. With Rodriguez, though, obviously you like Comerica Park, good place to pitch. I mean, I would say the same thing for Chase Field. Pretty decent venue for pitching. I don't think it really changes anything drastically as far as expectations for next season. I'm not expecting a 3.30 ERA again, but I'd say high threes probably pretty reasonable. Fantasy wise, I don't. When I think about Eduardo Rodriguez, I think about your fourth, fifth starter on a mixed league staff. Where do you kind of think he fits in there?
Yeah, that's where I would value him too. I certainly would not overrate what he did this year, the end of season stats, and a lot of that is because he was great for the first 2 months.
Yeah.
His ERA from June 1st on was 4.24.
Right. After the
He
finger injury.
right.
Yeah.
He had a 21% strikeout rate from that time on, a 1.29 whip. And realistically, like, that's kind of who he's been, right?
Yeah.
4.74 ERA in 2021, 4.05 ERA in 2022. The strikeout rate has fallen since Boston. He's kind of lost that changeup over the last 3 years. When he was in Boston and people were like, "Ooh, he might be something." The changeup was his pitch, and it rebounded a little bit in the second half of the year, while everything else was kind of cratering around it. But he is a guy who way outpitched his peripherals. His defense independent ERA, which is a stat that I really like, that basically tries to take luck out of ERA. What would happen on these pitches without just the performance of the defense? It was a 2.64 DERA in the first half of the year and 4.09 in the second half. He gave up a 9% barrel rate in the second half of the year. The swinging strike rate fell. So this is somebody where, if you're valuing him as now he's on a much better team, and maybe you get something between a 3.9 and a 4.1 ERA, and you're not hoping for strikeouts with him, right? You're maybe getting 8.5 strikeouts per 9. Like, if you value him at that, that's still a solid pitcher for your team. But if he's going in drafts like a 3.5 ERA guy who's now pitching for a World Series contender, I'm a little hesitant. So it's going to just depend on cost for me.
Right. And I think you're probably going to sit him when he pitches against the Dodgers in Coors Field. I think he's kind of the pitcher you're gonna pick your spots for when it makes the most sense to use Erod. I like him. I think if you remember a couple of years ago when he signed the deal with the Tigers, they signed him based on the advanced metrics that were saying that he deserved better results than what he got.
Right.
And now this offseason, he signed and his results were better than what the advanced stats said. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, he's really never been bad. Like, his 2021 season with the Red Sox was bad, and that was the season you're talking about where all the peripherals said he should have been better. But like, he's been a solid major league pitcher since he came up with the Red Sox in 2015, and so I think you're not going to get anything that is detrimental. But I think at this point, like, he's going to be 31 years old. We know the pitcher he is.
Yeah.
And so I'm not expecting some jump, and I don't think last year was a jump, which I think some people might if you just look at the surface level stats.
So a player who kind of surprised this season was actually non-tendered by the Tigers 2 years ago, Jeimer Candelario. So he gets a 3-year, $45 million deal with the Reds. When I saw that come across last night, I was like, oh, what? What now? Because it doesn't really feel like the Reds should be adding position players. They should be subtracting them. But I do think maybe now that they've signed Candelario, who is expected to split time between first base, third base, DH, you use them all over the place, this probably opens the door for a trade, probably for a pitcher, which is definitely what the Reds need more than a position player. But I guess this is what gets them in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've thought that before, right? Like, all last year, we were like, well, the Reds have so many position players and position player prospects, they should trade for starting pitching. They haven't yet done it. They desperately need to do it. I hope they do it, because this is not a team. This team right now, like, again, we'll see how the lineup shakes out. But according to Roster Resource, this is a team that now has Christian Encarnacion Strand and Jake Fraley on the bench, and I don't think they deserve to be there. I think that this might spell the end for Jonathan India. Right now the Roster Resource has him as their starting DH, but I think like that would be Encarnacion Strand's spot, at least in my opinion. whether a team wants to trade for India or not, who's graded out as a pretty poor defensive second baseman, the Reds may have to move a Noel V. Marte or Ellie De La Cruz. They're not going to move Ellie De La Cruz, but you know what I mean? Like they might have to move Encarnacion Strand or Noel V. Marte or somebody like that. So that'd be interesting to see. And then listen, Spencer Steer is now going to be the starting left fielder.
Yeah.
He has talked about wanting to play left field. That's great. I think it's kind of a bummer for Jake Fraley because I think he's done nothing but produce when given the opportunity. And I know he gets hurt a lot, but I think he was deserving of, a starting spot or a strong side platoon spot. And I don't know that he has that right now because I don't see them playing him in right field defensively over Will Benson.
So with Candelario, he hit 22 homers, had 70 RBIs in 140 games last season between the Nationals and the Cubs. So all this conversation this week about Verdugo, Soto, right field porch, Yankee Stadium. Look at Candelario's baseball savant page and the Statcast estimates. You can see if he played all his games in Cincinnati, San Francisco, whatever. So if you check it for Candelario, Statcast estimates he would have hit 30 home runs if he played every game at Great American Ballpark last year. I don't know if that will happen because Candelario is he's like a doubles hitter. In my mind, that's what he is, and has been the case throughout the course of his career. That's like that's the ceiling, right? I think he's probably more like 25, but still, he gets a big bump here fantasy wise going to Cincinnati. The question is where does he go in drafts? Like, how high is reasonable for him to be moved up on draft boards? Is he a sure thing corner infielder, got to be drafted in every league type player?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think he needs to be drafted in every league. Unless you play in some. We're not talking about like a wacko 6-team league or something, but in most leagues that are standard practice. Because listen, to your point, like he made clear changes to his approach that led to some of that. 22 home runs was a career high for him. He moved out of Comerica Park. He went to the Nationals at the start of the year, which is a more hitter-friendly park. His pull rate on the year jumped 6%. His fly ball rate went up. His ground ball rate dropped. He hasn't pulled the ball this much since 2019. I think when you see that kind of huge change, that suggests somebody making a conscious decision. And he saw results from that. I would expect him to do the same thing in Great American Ballpark. He's an 8% barrel rate guy. He's not a huge launch angle guy. So you're not talking, like you said, you're probably not talking about 30, but he hit 22, pencil him in for 25, 26, 27, something like that. Maybe instead of going 70 runs, 70 RBI, he goes 80 because he's in a better lineup. Or maybe, you bump him up even more. He stole 8 bases last year. The Reds run a little bit, so maybe he steals 8 again. I don't think you pump him up that much. And he's a career 245 hitter. So his 250 batting average from this year should be easy to replicate, if not get a little boost at a better park. So if you're telling me I get a 260 hitter who hits 25 home runs with 170 runs plus RBIs and 8 stolen bases, that's helping me in every single category.
Yeah, and the supporting cast should be fun too. Pretty much every spot in that lineup can be productive.
So I would go beyond that to say I would take him as my third baseman. If I was going to wait on third baseman, last year, I think he falls into that everybody said, "Oh, second half of the year, Ke'Bryan Hayes broke out and he's got the steals and whatever." It's and he's a fringe starter in a 15-team league. Well, Jeimer Candelario's in that argument. If you're in a 15-team league and he's your starting third baseman, I think you're totally fine with that.
Yeah, Alec Boehm's probably in early mocks, probably going quite a bit higher, but I see them as somewhat similar.
Yeah, and I think was gonna say the power context is maybe a little better in Jeimer Candelario, but I do think you're right. They're fairly evenly matched.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I'm sure because of the stadium context, we're going to see Candelario be a bit more popular as time moves on here, and justifiably so. So you remember we're shifting to NFL for a second here, but the line for this Patriots Steelers game today was 30 points.
It's
They've
already over.
surpassed it in the first half. I think it's 21-10 right now, which is pretty hilarious. Live report from the Rotoworld Baseball show. And while we're on the topic of NFL, this Sunday night is a much more exciting matchup between MVP candidates and Super Bowl contenders when Jalen Hurts and the Eagles travel to Dallas for a battle with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. That game should be a blast. I can't wait to see that. Yeah, Bailey Zappi has 3 touchdown passes in the first half. Crazy.
Against the Steelers defense.
Yeah.
Think
Wow.
Thursday night football doesn't make sense.
It never will. Never will. It's got that going for it. All right. So let's hop to the Orioles, who added a closer, Craig Kimbrel, signed a 1-year, $13 million deal with the Orioles. We knew the Orioles were going to be on the lookout for some late inning help. Of course, Felix Bautista set to miss the entire 2024 season following Tommy John surgery. So it was on the priority list along with getting another starting pitcher, which they should do. They've been open about wanting to add some rotation depth. So this addition of Kimbrel, they're saying from the outset, hey, he's our closer.
He's closer. Yeah.
Day one. Yennier Cano moving back into a setup role. We saw a little bit about what Cano could do in the closer role while Bautista was sidelined trying to make his way back. Cano is not like a guy who is going to miss bats en masse, like your dominant closers these days, Diaz, Hader, etc. So you have a guy like Kimbrel who's done it for a really long time. Maybe not the pitcher he used to be. He's going to be 36 in May, so he's getting up there. He got off to a rough start last season, if you remember, with the Phillies, but he was pretty good for about the final 4.5 months or so. Really good. So, hey, to me, it makes sense. I'm not overly excited about it. Certainly not the pitcher that Bautista is fantasy-wise, but the Orioles are a really good team. I still think they could do more. They should do more, but they're still poised to be a very good team. I don't think Kimbrel's a top 10 closer. He's probably in that 15-ish range.
I don't know. I might put him top 10.
Really?
I need to see how things shake out, obviously. Where do some of the other guys land? What's whatever situations we get. But like Kimbrel was good last year. I mean, his velocity is on par with what we've seen in years past. He was averaging 96 with the four seam. He saw his home run rate go up because Philadelphia is not exactly a pitcher's park. Baltimore is though. So I think you could see that home run to fly ball rate drop, and that that homer per 9 that he had was the most he's had. It was actually the second highest rate of his career. His homer per 9 this year, behind the 2019 season where he just imploded, where everything in 2019 was a travesty. And his strikeouts went up last year. His swinging strike rate went up last year. I think he still looked solid. The swinging strike rate was over a 2% jump. The four seam is still missing bats. That curveball had a 17% swinging strike rate. Like, I think if you take out 35 innings from 2019 and 2020, he's been just so dominant, or just, so effective for so long. And now he's going to a team that was arguably the best team in the American League last year. Like, if he saved 23 games in a part-time role for the Phillies, like, I'll pencil him in for 30 easily with the Orioles. I think there's a chance you get like 35 or more out of him. So I don't know. I'm hard pressed to find 9 guys that I feel more comfortable about than Craig Kimbrel.
Yeah, I mean, all right, let's take a look. So Edwin Diaz is for some reason is still number one, which is fine. I think come spring training, maybe he will be, but okay.
Sure.
In some of the early mocks, he's number one. Josh Hader, Emmanuel Clase, Camilo Duvall, Joan Duran, Raisel Iglesias, David Bednar, Alexis Diaz, Jordan Romano.
So that's where you're getting into it, right? So the David Bednar, Alexis Diaz range for me,
Paul Sewald, Ryan Presley,
right, is like, okay, David Bednar been really good, right? No knock on David Bednar. The team context is obviously going to be much worse. And so you're like, am I really going to take David Bednar over taking Craig Kimbrel, who's closing for the Cubs, but it's closing for the Orioles now? Like, maybe. I mean, Bednar saved 39 games. Do I think that's going to happen again? I don't know. Alexis Diaz, 37 saves, 3.07 ERA, worse strikeout rate than Kimbrel, worse park than Kimbrel. Isn't that kind of on par? Like a 35 save closer with a low 3s ERA and 12 K per 9. So I think the Orioles are probably a better team than the Reds. I think that Baltimore is a better park to pitch in. So I think that's kind of the range right now with him, where I feel comfortable slotting him into that area.
I mean, I think the fact is you can probably get Kimbrel 50 picks later than Diaz.
Sure. Yeah. For as of right now, you can.
As of right now. Yeah.
Also, like Paul Sewald, I'm a huge fan. Sorry, I know it hurts you every time anybody who just leaves the Mets
and ex-Met
just becomes so good.
Yeah, we're going to talk about another ex-Met in a minute.
But like, again, Paul Sewald in a great year, 34 saves, 3.12 ERA, K per 9 under 12. And that was in a career year. Yeah. So are you banking on Sewald to have another career year? And if he does, he basically matches what we think Kimbrel's going to do. So again, I'm not saying Kimbrel definitely over those guys. I'm saying that range, that tier of closers to me, what is that, like 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of? Like that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is like there's going to be job security. Like they've already committed to him.
Right.
They think Cano is more of a setup type. And if Kimbrel is just like, hey, you're our 9th inning guy, you're coming in, no runners on base, get us 3 outs. Like that's probably gonna be a pretty good spot for him. So I like the move. I know some people have been critical about it, but I don't see much to be critical about. But as long as the Orioles get a starting pitcher, I think they're going to be in great shape going into next season. Mm-hmm. Probably one of maybe the weirdest move of the week. So the Mariners basically a salary dump trade, sending Marco Gonzalez's contract, Evan White's contract, and Jarred Kelenic to the Braves. Get back just Jackson Kowar, who was a Royals prospect at one time, Cole Phillips as well. This was just a pure salary dump. The Braves already moved Marco Gonzalez to the Pirates, and they took the money to get Kelenic. Weird trade. In my mind, it's like you want to move that money so bad that you just give up on Jarred Kelenic, who's still young. And I know things like haven't worked out, but he was better last year. Like he showed some signs of progress. He's not matching the hype of the Edwin Diaz trade and being the centerpiece and all that stuff. He still struck out a lot. But he was better, and he's still super young. I don't get it. I don't understand this trade at all.
I don't get it I get the idea of saying, okay, he's not who he thought he was. Somebody's going to pay me for who he thought he was. I'll move him. I get that. I don't get he's not who we thought he was. Let's just get rid of him for nothing.
Yep.
maybe they have a plan. I mean, I'm assuming they have a plan. They're going to do something with that money. Who knows what it is? And yeah, there were some improvements. I mean, you're talking about improving a strikeout rate from
nothing. Yeah.
from 33.7 to 31.7, but he improved his strikeout rate. He improved his walk rate. His swinging strike rate dropped a little bit, even though it was still 14%. The zone contact rate went up a lot. He I have a hard time thinking somebody who we've seen play at that high of a level. I know it was just the minors, but like is totally incapable of putting that together at the major league level. Yeah. But maybe that's what's happening with like him and Joe Adell. There's too much swing and miss in their game, and at the major league level, it gets taken advantage of in a way that it doesn't in AAA. But he's a 24-year-old kid who put up a 9.5% barrel rate, who, can play solid defense, has shown marginal gains, right? Continues to absolutely crush AAA whenever he's given the opportunity to do it. I think he's earned a couple more years. And for his development's sake and his fantasy value, obviously we're super happy for the move, because I feel better about the Braves putting him in a context where he can make those changes and develop in that way.
The pressure's off, I guess, is kind of the point. I mean, that lineup is just so good from top to bottom, where he can just be a role player and he's not expected to match that hype, be the number one prospect, and it's all on your shoulders. He can grow and watch these other great players under their tutelage and make some progress here. Because I mean, when I'm saying he made progress last year against breaking pitches in 2022, Jarred Kelenic hit 057. 057, no, 0 home runs. Last year, this is not a big improvement, but he hit 221. Slugging percentage was 385. I mean, like, that's not good, but it's like worlds better. And he had like a 481 OPS against lefties in 2022. Last year he was pretty much equal righties versus righties and lefties. It was like almost the same OPS.
Yeah.
I mean, I would take that as being a tiny victory in terms of his development.
Sure. I think to me it's also I mean, we're talking about like the under the hood stuff. I mean, he hit 253 as opposed to hitting 141. That's a pretty sizable jump,
Right.
To me it's also like, if you look at some of the stuff in his approach, to me it's somebody who's it's a huge mental component.
Yeah.
Right? He went from hitting 53% fly balls in 2022 to hitting 28% fly balls in 2023. Not just that, but in the minors in 2023, his fly ball rate was 19%. That is a drastic approach change.
Crazy. Yep.
He went from pulling the ball 31% of the time in 2022 to pulling it 41% of the time in 2023. In AAA, he sold out for a 60% pull rate, basically 58%. So those are changes that are sizable enough from year to year, where this is somebody who's trying to land on an approach.
Yeah.
Who's a young kid trying to land on an approach that works at a level that he has not yet been able to, produce at, probably pushing and stressing because he was the next big thing and it didn't happen. And so obviously he's putting pressure on him to figure out what works. So going to a team filled with hitters that are really, really, really good, and can probably offer him insight, but also, as you mentioned, he doesn't have to press at all. Because even though the Mets were the team where that was his original, team, like, he was the prize for the Mariners.
Yep.
The Braves got him for nothing. People have written him off now. The Braves don't. He doesn't have to perform up to. What does he have to perform up to? The standard of like who? They got nothing back in that deal.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's a fresh start for him. Like you said, the pressure's off. Vaughn Grissom, there was a little bit of time where there was some speculation that Grissom could play some left field. Looks like that's going to be Kelnic's spot. Uh, we'll see what happens. Poor Vaughn Grissom. I think he probably needs to get traded. He needs to change scenery here. I don't know if the Braves believe in him at this point. I think it's been clear for the past like 9 months. We thought he'd be the starting shortstop out of spring training. They put Orlando Arcia in there. Grissom, I think, only got like 50 at bats all season. Maybe a change of scenery would be best for him at this point.
Maybe. I mean, Arcia did hit 230 in the second half of the year.
He was bad in the second half.
And listen, the Braves, don't need him to be a world beater with the bat. He was an above average defensive shortstop, and that's maybe all they want with all the hitters they have. But yeah, it's unfortunate for Vaughn Grissom. There was people, that prospect writers that I follow that were really high on him. And maybe that is a move because, Braves probably still need some starting pitching.
Yeah, they do.
I know they have some guys that are injured and coming back, but right now, you're set to have Bryce Elder and Oscar Yanoa in your starting rotation, and you might want to strengthen that up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see what they do. I mean, the Braves were in on Aaron Nola before he re-signed with the Phillies, so clearly the Braves want to get some rotation help. We'll see. I think Yamamoto and Ohtani landing where they're going to land, where that's going to open things up where we haven't even heard a word about Blake Snell. Nothing.
Right. Blake Snell, there are some teams that are interested in Giolito, but nothing's happening there. Jordan Montgomery is another one where it's like, people are trying to connect some dots, but that's going to wait. So there's a lot of wait and see out here.
Yeah. And with the Mariners, shedding the salary, like since the Yankees got Juan Soto, maybe Cody Bellinger is what they're going for.
Maybe.
I think that'd be a great fit, personally.
Do you see how the Mets answered all these Braves moves today?
No, what did they do?
They signed Jorge Lopez to a minor league contract.
Oh, wait, I saw that right before the show. Okay.
Yeah.
David Stearns is just like, well, he's following like the Brewers model. He's getting all of these relievers, and he's hoping he can recreate the magic from Milwaukee, where they make these little tweaks, and then suddenly they're awesome.
Listen, 2 years ago, Jorge Lopez was great. I know it was
very good.
I know it was literally the only good year of his career, but he was great.
He was.
You can't take it away from him.
Yeah. No. Well, maybe if one or two of them hit, I'd be thrilled. But that we need bigger. We need to think bigger. So we'll see what happens. But I'm hoping we get a lot of activity in the coming days. If there's a Shohei Ohtani signing or Yamamoto, we'll have to do an emergency pod probably. So stay tuned. I'm not sure the next time we'll do a show, but we are called the Rotoworld Baseball Show. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can actually find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. Also, do yourself a favor. Check out the Rotoworld Basketball Show. Vaughn, Raphael, and Dan are doing a great job breaking down everything you need to know in the world of fantasy basketball. Follow us on Twitter or X if you don't already. Eric is at SamskyNYC. I'm at DJ Short. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the hot stove. We'll see you next time.